Recording in
Okay, we're
progress.
recording.
Uh, Good morning, everyone. This is the Finance Committee of the Town Council, calling the meeting to order. We're holding this meeting remotely by Zoom per various actions by the legislature. And if you are if you want to make a public comment, please raise your hand and we will bring you into the room to give a public comment. If you're having trouble connecting, please contact us and we'll see what we can do to get you on board. The first thing I have to do is check to see whether we certainly have a quorum, see whether the members of the committee can hear me and can be heard. So I'll just go in order of the people on my screen. Councilor Haneke.
Present.
Andy.
Present.
Kathy.
Here.
Bernie.
Present.
Okay, we don't have Alicia or Matt with us at the moment. But we do have a quorum. So let me see if there's anyone that wants to make a public comment. This is the accounting department. Go ahead, bring them in, please.
I'm promoting them to panelists. You all should have individual invitation links, just so you know. Okay. And it looks like a new person has joined. So Bob, you might want to repeat that it's public comment.
Yes. So we'll have public comment at this time. If anyone in the audience wishes to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Can you bring Tony in, please?
Hi, thank you. I joined 5 minutes late at the last meeting and missed public comment. So it's pretty right at the very beginning. Just encouraging you to support the 6% for the regional school budget, and in identifying where the money could come from, I would encourage you to look at the extra 0.5% that is being given to the capital budget. If ARPA money is tapped, the 2.5 million earmarked for the Bang Center would be a good place to look. The solar panels, as Kathy and Mandy Jo explained at the last meeting, are a great investment. So I think that would be a poor choice of where to get the funding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see, no, George, did you want to make a comment? If you do so, raise your hand, please. All right, so I think that does it for public comment. So let's move on to the main part of our agenda today. We want to review the conservation, sustainability, planning, and inspections primarily. Then we'll have a discussion of the regional public schools. And I don't know if we'll not going to do much of a review of the draft report because it's still pretty draft and it's not complete. I will, but let's talk about how we can finish it off at the end of the meeting. So why don't we bring on conservation? Dave, I think you're on.
Yeah.
So there were a bunch of comments in there that we got answers to, and I think that is there something you wanted to say?
Sure. I typically, if it's okay with you, I typically give a very brief, I know we're short on time, but I give a very brief overview of just kind of the functional area, because we are, kind of a working unit of the town. And I can be 2 minutes, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So thanks everybody for having us this morning. I'm joined by Rob, Christine, and Stephanie, the department heads in conservation and development. I think you all, for the most part, know us quite well. Within this functional area are the departments of conservation, planning, sustainability. Sustainability now is its own standalone department, and inspection services, Um, although it's not on the org chart, I would suggest that facilities is also very much a part of this functional area. We work very closely and are situated here in Town Hall with Jeremiah LaPlante, our facilities manager. You know, our focus overall is on community development. We follow very closely the master plan, a number of other town plans that have been adopted by various boards and committees, including the master plan, open space and recreation plan, and many others. This is a really cohesive working group. It's really one of the kind of joys of my life working with the people. We have about 24 full and part-time people in staff in this functional area. They're very dedicated, work long hours, nights, weekends. It's really a pleasure to work with everybody here, and particularly the department heads. But you know, we're only as good as the people that work with us and for us. And you know, I'm very proud to be working for and with them every day to make the community a better place. We also work very closely with DPW, recreation, health, many other departments, and of course community groups, and also the colleges. Um, Broad range of projects and initiatives. I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder, but you know, we work on zoning, sustainability, market rate housing, affordable housing, sheltering. You know, the VFW project down the street from Town Hall is a very big and very important project for the community, and we're leading the way on that. Park and common planning. We've got the incredible work being done on the North Common right in front of Town Hall. That's 11 years in the making. Chris Brestrup and Nate Malloy and myself, and with assistance from DPW 11 years ago, started that project, and it's really exciting to see that coming to fruition. Safe and healthy neighborhoods, safe and healthy rentals are all part of our portfolio. And I would suggest that, you know, 75 to 80% of the grants that the town seeks and receives come through this functional area. So it's a really dynamic group. It's a wonderful group, and we're happy to be here with you this morning. Um, Transitioning here quickly, Bob, to conservation. The focus areas for last year and for the coming year really fall into a couple of different categories. Happy to take your questions if there are additional questions beyond what we answered. We're really focusing on kind of taking care of what we have. That's really a real priority for the conservation department. Taking care of all the trails. We have 80 miles of trails. And my focus with getting grants, seeking CPA funding over the last couple of years has been really about restoring and enhancing what we have. You've seen more parking areas going up. ADA access is a big focus, and repairing and replacing old 20 to 30-year-old bridges, really big focus. We're working with the Conservation Commission on a land use committee, and this group is focused on how do we manage our over 2,000 acres of conservation land now and in the future, particularly with a focus on global climate change. Those lands will be changing. The biota, the animals and the plants and the trees will be changing. That's a given over the next 20 to 30 years. How do we manage those lands for people and for wildlife? Puffer's Pond continues to be a big focus. I noted in some of my comments for the budget document that we submitted a $400,000 grant to repair the dike and the dam at Puffer's Pond. So that's got to be a priority, both from clearly a public safety standpoint, but also a recreation, a passive recreation standpoint. We oversee community gardens in two locations, Amethyst Brook and Fort River. We've got somewhere on the order of 65 individuals and families using those community gardens. So conservation staff focus on those. And lastly, of course, Hickory Ridge is a big focus moving forward. We're really proud to be part of that project. And I did answer some of those questions that were posed to me on that. So I think with that, I'll stop on conservation and turn it over to you, Bob, and any questions that the committee might have.
Bob, can we quickly confirm Alicia can hear and be heard?
Yeah, I was going to do that. Alicia?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Did you have any other questions, Councilor Walker?
Not yet, thank you.
Okay. So the one question I have is, or maybe it's more of a concern, and it's it seems to be very difficult for businesses to get started in Amherst. And I spoke with one person who has a business here in Amherst and an office in Northampton, and this person said it was like pulling teeth to uh, get started in Amherst, but it was a piece of cake to get started in Northampton. So I'm wondering if there's, you notice that, or you noted that some projects are they're complex because of the development, or the areas that are open to development are also regulated heavily by other departments, and which makes it more difficult. But can you kind of give an overview of this and what we're doing to try to make it easier for people to develop or to open businesses?
Sure. I think if you don't mind, I'm gonna look to Rob and Christine to jump in on this, um, because they were the ones who answered those specific questions having to do with business development in town.
Okay, Rob.
Thank you. I did try to answer this question in the document that was sent around, so I'll just summarize that. In the past 12 years that I've been here, we've made some pretty good progress on trying to be more available and help applicants work their way through a complicated process. Before I get into that, I will mention that we often look to Northampton and have often discussed when we're proposing bylaw amendments, that many of the uses, the non-residential uses in Northampton in their zoning bylaw are simply yes. Where we have a lot of special permits, and we're kind of picking away at that with bylaw amendments to reduce the number of special permits that are needed, which is a costly and lengthy process. So we're trying to keep that process available and intact for the uses that really should be subject to it. But we many years ago created a position of the permit administrator in this office, and that position is held by Jen Mullins currently, and she does a lot of work with being the first point of contact for applicants, and stays in touch with the applicant throughout the process, regularly checks in, which is nice. I'll talk a little bit about our OpenGov system that's now in place, but with our permit tracking and kind of project tracking system, I often see the communication that's going on, and regularly it's just a question or a communication with a applicant to say, hey, what's going on? We've met, we've talked about your new restaurant, you started the process, but there's more to do, and there's a lot of that type of communication going on, which has been really helpful. All of our staff meets regularly with other departments. There's very good communication between fire, public works, all of our inspectors, the public health department, and others, to make sure everyone's aware of the issues, the status of projects, and what needs to be done in an effort to make sure the applicant is advised properly on what they need to complete in order to get their project either started or finished. We are, like I said, often recommending bylaw changes, and adding to the list of priorities. Some of them move ahead, some of them don't. We've had really good luck with the food establishment amendment that happened recently, where restaurants can be permitted with administrative approval rather than going through the special permit process. So we've seen a lot of activity there. When we get to my budget, I'll talk about a little bit about numbers on things that have happened in that area. We reach out and stay in touch with the directors at the bid and the chamber. We recently held a meeting with the Black Business Association of Amherst, just to talk about what process looks like here. This isn't something that we create, it's something that we're handed with the zoning bylaws, and we try to make sure everyone's aware that there are steps that the applicant needs to go through. And and really look out for things that might be concerning to an applicant for their particular idea before they sign into a lease, and find out maybe the challenges of a particular space. So we're recommending to all the groups that they direct people our way first before they get that far along. We are often, always, Christine and I in particular, having meetings with potential applicants, prospective business owners, whether it's somebody with more than one establishment somewhere in other communities, our communities, or somebody's first attempt at opening their own business. And we sit with them, we bring in whoever needs to be brought into the process, and they're given a lot of information. It's can be really overwhelming. It can be a ton of steps that need to be followed. And oftentimes, we suggest either breaking it into pieces and depending on the response we get, a timeline on how to best approach that. So our goal is to make sure that, any application that comes into this office for a land use permit is in its best condition that it can be, and has the best chances of being approved. So we work really hard at making sure applications are complete. We tend to know what the boards like to see, what they focus on, what their areas of interest are. And that changes as board members change. So we adapt to that, and we work with applicants to really try to get their project in the best condition when being considered, and hope for approval, hope for maybe even in one session, so that the time doesn't drag on. As far as building permits go, I think that might have been part of one of the questions. These are reviewed really quickly. I mean, quicker than most communities that I'm aware of. Generally, building permits are reviewed in 3-4 days max, never more than 10 days. When times are really busy or it's a more complicated project, but there's very rapid response to a building permit application that's submitted, and even more so now with the use of OpenGov. So I'll finish with OpenGov. OpenGov has been a great tool. We're probably just over a year of using it for most of our building and trade permits, licensing, most recently rental permitting, and food establishment licenses. And not only is it easy to use, it's a way a contractor or applicant can submit an application over the weekend, late at night, when they're not working, and have time to focus on that. They can ask questions any time of the day, and know that somebody from staff is going to see it in their workflow the next business day. And our staff is very responsive to the questions that come there. It's a place to put all of the documents associated with the project, so they're easy to find both by the applicant. Maybe the owner has access and is given part of the contact information, so that they can see what's going on and know that their project is proceeding. And that follows through all the way through to completion and certificate of occupancy, right up to the very final stages of the project. So we're seeing that to be used more and more, and the benefits of it, and we'll continue to encourage use of that. I did note that other than bringing in more of the permitting process into OpenGov, so we don't currently use it for any of our land use permitting. I note that we need to make a significant change and update to our website to make it easier to find information, have more information available. And that's something that we hope to be able to accomplish with assistance from other departments. In particular, IT is needed for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Haneke, questions?
Yeah, no, I thank everyone for the written responses. And so I'm going to focus on some questions or some concerns I have with those written responses as it relates to the budget. I was struck by the written responses about a question I asked of for the planning department of what are the goals and plans for feedback on the initiatives during a development phase for particular things. And I mentioned, because, all of those things in some sense relate to the goals, the manager's goals of economic development and all, but the council itself is a key stakeholder because they're your 13 votes. you need 9 of us to vote for it. And it seems like the plan is to say, we're not going to talk to the council until we've got a final project that we're ready to go to public hearing for. And I'm curious what the thought process is on that. When wouldn't it be more efficient to figure out where the council is on these projects we're paying consultants for or spending a lot of staff resources on, to ensure that they have a chance of success at the council? Because if you're working a lot or you're going through that and you're never talking to a significant number of counselors, and then you come to the council and you've spent all this money and the council says, you know, we don't like that direction. Wasn't that a waste of time when it's the council's votes you need? So I'd like you to respond a little bit more to some of that, of the impression that it gave of waiting till the very end to talk to the people whose votes you need. And then the other impression I got from reading all of the responses was potentially that the inspections department and the planning department might be slightly at odds on how and where to go about, this goes directly back to Councilor Hegner's question, go about making and reducing those barriers. The inspections building inspector Mora just talked about needing zoning changes, that he's doing a lot on the once you've applied to try and make it go as smooth as possible, but the zoning is a lot of the complication. Yet the planning department's response seemed to be that improving economic that by providing more places for people to live, work, and shop could improve economic opportunities and all of this barriers. But and you could extrapolate by the creating improved places for living, working, and shopping will result in reducing barriers to economic development, without really talking about the barrier of the complication of the zoning bylaw. So I read these answers as potentially the two departments are in conflict about how we reduce barriers to economic development. So I'd really like to hear from our planning department on that issue, because I think Rob really discussed his thoughts on it already.
May I?
Yes.
Respond? So I don't think we're in conflict. We work very closely together on all the projects, and we do see and discover flaws in our zoning bylaw that we intend to address. But I really don't think the zoning bylaw is, necessarily at fault for some of the issues that we have with regard to economic development. I think that we are always interested in helping people to start their businesses, and we do make every effort to meet with them. And, the minute we find out that somebody is interested in opening a business, we, try to set up a meeting with them and help them along with the process. So I don't really think that there's a conflict between what inspection services does and what planning does. There are I think just by the nature of Amherst, various things that were set in place years ago that require special permits, and we have eliminated some of those for food and drink establishments and other things, and ADUs for one thing, accessory dwelling units. So it makes it easier to do those things. It is challenging at this time. We've been shorthanded in the planning department since I think November of 2022. We've been down a person ever since then. So to take on things that are, going to be beneficial to the town is challenging. We have all of our regular permitting to do, and the projects that we're working on, such as downtown design guidelines and other projects. So, we're just like lacking a fourth wheel, if you want to talk about it that way. And, I think we have taken on zoning amendments in the past, and we've been successful. There was one year, a few years ago, where we had 11 zoning amendments that went through. But, recently we've had a hard time to initiate projects. We also have a lot of projects that are related to grant funding that we have gotten, and so we have to work on those. So we have to kind of balance things out. So I agree that there are changes that we could make in our zoning bylaw that would probably make it easier to develop land and to open businesses, but we just haven't had the bandwidth recently to attack those in the last, say, year and a half. What was the other part of your question? Bringing town council into the process of developing projects. So it is not typical for us to reach out to town council to involve members in projects. We certainly appreciate when town council members attend our meetings and make comments and are speak as residents, but there isn't a process in place for us to necessarily interact with the town council as a whole on all of these projects. If town council would like us to make presentations, we're always available to do that. And if town council would like to reach out to us through the town manager to say, hey, can you come and talk to us about our downtown design guidelines project? We'd be happy to do that and tell you about the status of that project and other things as well. So since there isn't a formal way of involving town council along the way, we do our best to reach out and make sure that everybody knows when meetings are occurring and that there are opportunities to participate in stakeholder groups and things like that. One of your members did participate as a resident stakeholder in the early stages of the downtown design guidelines. So so we're always open to meeting, but of course we have to go through the town manager. And if you would like us to come and give you a report on any of these projects, we'd be happy to do that. Does that answer your question?
I guess I would like to follow up with how does one counselor become a stakeholder in a resident group and other counselors not invited to become those same stakeholders? Number one, but number two, I've as a member of CRC, I've specifically asked for CRC to be involved through our chair. I don't know whether you were at the meetings when we got to those things, and I haven't seen any follow up with that. So I will continue to follow up with the CRC chair because that's the committee it involves with. But I guess I'm still confused how that happens. It's not totally budget related, so I don't want to get too far into it, but it is, the council asked for through the budget process, the Dodson and Flinker design guidelines. We sort of drove funding that, yet we don't seem to be involved in it. And I find that very strange as a budget related item, but we can talk later.
Okay. And as far as having a counselor involved in the stakeholder group, that counselor reached out to us and asked to be involved in the stakeholder group because that counselor lives in the downtown area. Any other of the council members could have, requested to be involved in that group or those groups, but I didn't hear from anybody else. There is a little challenge for us to be in communication with counselors given guidelines that we've been given by the town manager about communication. And so I think, in general, we communicate with the town manager in order to get to town council members. So town council may want to talk to the town manager about how to make that more of a transparent, fluid process. And I'd be open to that. And I did not know that CRC was interested in being involved in the downtown standards project. And so if that is true, I'd be happy to work with CRC on that. So that was something that I wasn't aware of. Okay.
Thank you. Councilor Walker?
Thank you, Bob. So most of my questions were just answered, but I just had a couple of clarifying points related to economic development. And I think one of them was about the process question. And I think Mandy Jo already asked part of that question. But the second piece that I was wondering is, and Christine, I think you briefly touched on this, so maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on if the issues with the process are mostly zoning issues. I think you said that they were not. And so what are some other common issues that businesses face? Because I'm thinking in terms of what areas we can look at in terms of simplifying the process for business owners?
May I respond? So I think that business owners often aren't aware of the kinds of things that they need to do in order to get permits. Things like, sometimes hiring a surveyor to survey the property, and that costs a few $1,000s, or getting an architect in to do, existing conditions of a building or of a property, and then having, professional advice through an architect or through a mechanical engineer or whatever to help them to develop their ideas and make it possible to build what they need to build in order to get permitted. So that's what I mean by it's not all zoning. It's, the fact that they need to get permits, a lot of times they aren't aware of all the permits that they need to get. And then they're not aware that they need to have consulting help to help them get those permits. They can't just sketch something on a piece of paper and bring it into us. They have to show us, what is this thing going to look like? What is it going to, how is it going to be designed? And, you know, the boards and committees, particularly the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, have, fairly high expectations about what kinds of materials are brought to them in order for them to permit a project. So we help the applicant to understand what it is that they need to submit in order to get a permit. And some applicants are, maybe more naive than others, and some are more sophisticated than others. So different applicants respond to that information and those requirements in different ways. And we do try to, sit down and meet with them and help them as much as we can. And that's that's how I would respond to that.
Okay, thank you. And this is a comment that might not necessarily be for you specifically, but I think this might be something important to see if we can have a collaboration with our DEI department on, in terms of figuring out how we can provide educational resources in the name of bringing in diverse businesses into the town. And maybe that's something that we can collab, like you two across departments can collab on in the future. I think I'd be interested to see
Sure.
something like that.
That would be very good. Yep. I'd appreciate that too.
Okay, thank you. Kathy?
So I hope it's okay with you all if we skip around, because you provided us with terrific written responses. So I think I'll start with Stephanie because we haven't heard her voice yet. And we're thrilled with the work you do, Stephanie. So I was the one who noticed how many meetings you attend in your one-person department, and your plea for support staff, which clearly is not in this budget. So I wanted some sense if there's any way we can streamline, and I know your response was some of these are meetings you have to go to because they're part of getting a grant or working with groups. And I know you staff ECAC. So it's on the time in meeting side. And then the extent to which, as you're conceptualizing a grant, are you alone in writing the grant, or do you have support? Because my feeling is there's multiple new opportunities in the conservation sustainability area, and that not only do you have to apply for the grant, but then you have to administer it or think. So it's trying to get at some sense of, are you working overtime every day? Are you at a really high stress level, or is this kind of manageable? But is there anything that more teamwork from existing team could help out on?
So, as you noted, the positions that were requested were not part of this budget, and I just understand, I think I've been here a very long time. I understand we have the resources that we have, and they're not always going to be available. So, I think also because of my longevity with the town, I've also found a way to manage my work in a way that is sustainable for myself personally. But yes, I think I will be getting more support from uh, planning staff. Unfortunately, the new planner who has just come on board was identified as having at least 20% of their time to work with me. Unfortunately, because the planning department is not fully staffed, I think that person really needs to focus on supporting the work of the planning department. And until that happens, I won't get that additional support. Likewise, some administrative support was identified coming from the inspections department, from the front staff, and unfortunately, I think they too are also down right now. So I can't really rely on that particular support. I will say what's changed over the years is that some of the work that I do, and this is great, is becoming embedded within how the town operates and looks at sustainability. So for instance, when the capital project requests are made, they have to identify how this contributes to sustainability. So there are things that are beginning to happen without my needing to influence or support or direct or provide the resources for those things to happen. So for instance, I would say like, the police department looking at hybrid vehicles, or the fire department wanting to purchase equipment and add anti-idling technology onto it. Those kinds of things that are kind of happening on their own now reduce the amount of work that I have to do in that arena. So I will say, in terms of stress level, sometimes it's more stressful than others. I think what has to be understood is that we cannot pursue every single grant funding opportunity that comes along, and even something that seems like a great idea may not be. I will give an example of EV infrastructure and charging equipment. The town already has 7 dual heads charging stations in town. We're getting 2 level 3 chargers that will have 4 ports available that will be behind the what's called the CVS lot, but it's the public lot. So those opportunities already exist to some degree, more so than other communities. I have an EV, so looking at finding those locations across, certain corridors, we're actually doing pretty well. Also, doing more of that requires more infrastructure access that we don't necessarily have. So I'm not looking at every grant as in, oh, we have to do this just because it's here right now. I'm looking at what have we done? We're in pretty decent shape there. Maybe we can't do this at this time. So I'm assessing what is the bigger need. And also the things that we do at the municipal level, we're doing okay. Addressing our municipal operations and reducing our carbon emissions. We've been consistently reducing our emissions by 20%, according to the green communities goals that we set. So the last 3 years, we've met that goal, which is fantastic. What we really need to do more broadly is work on the community sector and the residential sector, which we don't have direct influence over. However, having things like the community choice aggregation coming on board is going to give us more of that opportunity. So looking at those kinds of projects that reach out to the community more broadly are the kinds of things that I tend to try to focus on more. And I'd say, that I can do what I can do. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. And thank you for the example. And just a quick follow-up. I have 2 more, Bob, if I can do them from different topics. But on the EV charging infrastructure, if we're purchasing it now or even in the pipeline in 2023, there's a federal direct credit rebate for those. So I don't know to the extent the finance department is saying, oh, this one is eligible, and packaging it up. So it's just I don't know, but it would be good to look at that.
Yeah, we have grant for all of the EV charging that we've installed. It's all been through grant funding.
It's all been grant anyway.
And we haven't, I think the most we've had to pay out of pocket has been $3,000, and there's going to be $3,000 more for the level 3 chargers, but that's the most out of all of the charging infrastructure that we've done. It's all been grant supported.
Bob, can I ask the 2 others, or do you want to go to, because one is in inspections, so it's I'm jumping into another topic.
Could you wait? Because I've got Dave and Bernie would
Sure,
like to make
sure.
comments.
I can wait. I'll come back to me.
Okay. Dave, did you want to comment or respond to something?
I think Bernie's hand was up before me, Bob. So I'm
Okay.
happy to wait for him.
Okay, Bernie.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Bob. I guess I jotted this down while we were talking about planning, but it applies more broadly, I think. What are folks finding as constraints to hiring? It seems to me that we've got key positions that just can't get filled or don't get filled. We tend to lose positions to private sector. So I'm wondering what we might do to where people are seeing some constraints around hiring. And I was also thinking that would it be possible if we had an internship program, say in planning, so we have a talented person who comes in as an intern, works as an intern for a while, for a year or two, and then when they graduate, they can move into a position. I know we don't do succession planning well. That's a fact. So, just a general kind of comment on our inability to fill those positions. I also want to editorialize for half a minute here in terms of I'm one of those people that thinks simple is better, and I've had in the past, way past, I've had wild experience with the building department, which I believe won't happen anymore because of the technology and the administrative changes that's come about with. This is pre-Rob, by the way, my experience. So I think things have gotten better. I also want to make the observation that there are 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, and everybody does something a little bit differently. So if the expectation in the area is I'm going to walk in with a pencil drawing and Amherst is going to approve it, that shouldn't be. Okay, so if we could go back to the question of hiring, thank you.
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
I think it's a number of things. I think one of the things is that there are very high expectations here of the people in the planning department. They have long hours that they work. They attend night meetings. They're often asked to staff multiple boards and committees. There's a very high expectation for the type of written material that comes out of our department and making sure that everything is really accurate. We have a good record of not having our decisions that are made by the Zoning Board of Appeals or the Planning Board appealed. So we stay out of court pretty well. Maybe I should knock on wood when I say that. We do have some fairly complicated projects such as the comprehensive or Chapter 40B projects that we put through, and we want to make sure that those are handled really well because the town supports affordable housing. So we're constantly working. We're working on deadlines. We're working on accuracy. We're working on just trying to get things out the door. And that is kind of overwhelming. It's overwhelming for the people who work in this department. The pressure is overwhelming. The amount of work is overwhelming. The, how can I say this in a charming manner, but the scrutiny by the public and the criticism by the public and the constant input from the public and trying to get that input onto the place where it should go, which would be the zoning board or the planning board. So we're constantly, we're being the mediator among all these different groups. And we are also accepting a lot of criticism and, negative comments. So I think it makes it, some people are overwhelmed, some people are disheartened, some people are just, kind of feeling like they never catch up, they never achieve what they want to achieve. So that's a feeling of not being successful. So I think somehow we have to make work in the planning department more of a, a professional situation where people aren't always feeling overwhelmed and incompetent. And the other thing is that the recent, and this didn't affect people farther back than a few months ago, but the recent salary study that was produced put the planning positions at a very, I shouldn't say very, because people will compare them with themselves. But anyway, at a lower level than they should be. The planning staff usually has master's degrees. I can't think of any oh yeah, there was one a few years ago who didn't have a master's degree, but they usually have master's degrees in planning. They've spent a long time in school. They have a lot of experience, and they're not recognized at the professional level that they should be recognized at in terms of rank on the org chart, and the salaries aren't that bad comparing them with other towns, but I think that the status of the position is not there. So it's really overwork, stress, lack of recognition, and then somebody sees another job in another location. We lost one person to the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. We lost somebody to Montague. We recently lost somebody to East Longmeadow. So, they're more the shiny object, or the grass is greener, or whatever is going on here. But, I think we should make an attempt to make working in the planning department a little more manageable and, life enhancing. Thank you.
Okay, I can I can certainly understand that. So again, I think we need to take all this very seriously and look to see how we can better, more effectively hire people, and maybe not just to staff up to what we have, but maybe staff beyond what we have, given the roles that people play and given the complications. And I wholeheartedly agree that the level of criticism that gets flung at planning department and other town employees is in Amherst is excessive, based on my experience in other communities.
Okay, thanks. Dave, did you want to jump in here?
Thanks, Bob. We've kind of gone all over the place here with lots of good questions and comments. I don't want to belabor some of these staffing issues or questions about staffing. I mean, clearly staffing town-wide and region-wide, and frankly in the country, has been challenging since the pandemic and will continue to be challenging. I think Chris and Stephanie and others have made good points here. But I don't want to take all of our time if we could on staffing. I know that each one of the department heads also wanted to say a little bit more about what they're doing for projects. Again, it's the finance committee's agenda, so I didn't know if you wanted to go back to the departments or just continue with the round robin questions. We're happy to do either.
Well, I think we can, as long as it's brief. I don't want to belabor the discussion of what we do, because we're trying to focus on the budget and on how to whether we should approve that or recommend that the council approve it or not. So I think people know pretty much what is done, but I mean, we can. I'm open to brief presentations or discussions of what the key things that each department does.
And we're happy to take other questions, that people want to throw at us with regard to follow up on the written piece. The other thing I wanted to say, Stephanie made a good point about sustainability, and I think it holds true with the planners as well, that we've moved in a good direction in terms of sustainability, that we now have, Stephanie has seeded ideas, processes, concepts, grants throughout the organization. So as much as Stephanie is the pivot point, she is the sustainability director. Many other people now are working, parts of their jobs are working on sustainability. Part of Dave Zomack, part of Rob Mora, part of Jeremiah LaPlante. Jeremiah, as our facilities director, is working closely with Stephanie on a number of sustainability related initiatives, but you don't see that in the sustainability budget. So I think we're moving in the right direction without question. the other thing I just wanted to say back to something Mandy said about kind of zoning, and I think you raised some very good points. I don't think the town hasn't quite figured out, we've been through a number of zoning initiatives, zoning changes over the past 3 to 5 years. I think we have a lot left to do there. What is the interface between the town council, the town council's committees, and planning initiatives, both projects and zoning initiatives? I go back to the town manager's goals as they're articulated by the town council, and I think all of us are still feeling our way through that. What is the feedback loop from the council goals to the manager then those goals translating to staff, and then those working their way back to the council in terms of grants and projects and initiatives. I think that's a work in progress, and I don't think any of us think that's a perfect process. And I think it's fair that we all look at that consistently and periodically to say, is it working, or are there ways we can improve it? So I think that's open to improvement at all levels.
Kathy, you wanted to raise some additional issues. So
Yeah, focused on budget.
Yep.
So I just have, Rob, they're both in your area. The first one is, you noted in the budget book that you're now responsible, and I put this in a question, but I just want to follow it up a little bit more, that if a resident, a property has brush or debris overhanging a sidewalk, you're now the place to go to give them a notice. They better do something about it or clean it up. I asked whether this would also apply to UMass-owned properties. In other words, would they have to respond, or there is a penalty fee, and large apartment buildings? And I'm using only one road as an example, but if you go up North Pleasant on one side of it, some of it is, I don't think the residential responsibility, but tree roots growing into the sidewalk that have severed it, but brushes coming out so that people avoid the sidewalk and go into the street. So the question is that working? And is there a way we can let people know that they can go in and then get action? Or do you need help from residents to alert the property owner that they better get their act? So it's like, how can we make this work? We put this new piece, and you said DPW used to worry about sidewalks. So that's question number one. And then the only expansion of staff in our budget is, in theory, finance with fees, and that's the expansion for the rental inspection bylaw. And so is there a plan, like within a year or within 2 years, to say, are we actually budget neutral on it? Here's the revenues, here's the expenses. And then is there any kind of thought of, we didn't put a sunset clause in it, but is this working kind of an assessment for a regular report? So is it achieving what we hoped it would achieve? Is it budget neutral? So just a future thinking on budget impact, because it jumps out at you as, we didn't increase sustainability staff. We didn't increase, but we increased inspectors. So those two questions, sidewalks and inspectors.
Okay. Yeah. So sidewalks are still a little new to us. It's been several months since it was handed over to us. We don't get an awful lot of complaints, outside of the snow seasons, and we haven't seen a lot of snow. So, we're still learning a little bit about that. I would have absolutely no hesitation contacting the university if they have a sidewalk that, breaches the sidewalks of private property owners, such as North Pleasant Street. I think ultimately they can, claim immunity to our general bylaws, and we would deal with that if they ever chose to do that. I think any interactions I've had with them for items that fall under our regulations, they're very responsive and try to accommodate what needs to be done. So I'm not really concerned about that, although I don't have any experience yet of dealing with a particular situation. We're not out looking for the problems ourselves. So it really is only on complaint response. And most of the public would logically think to call Public Works first. And when that happens, the staff contacts us and takes the information, conveys it to us, and then we follow up and deal with it. So that the person that made the call doesn't have to call another office and get bounced around. So we try to we've agreed, Guilford and I have agreed to try to do this as seamlessly as possible for the person making the call in this transition period that could go on for a year or two before, maybe it's more widely known. The presence on the website is with Public Works, and that directs you to inspection services. What we want to do is add, a very obvious place on the website that will get us the complaint or the report of the issue. We do often get them through our online complaint process that can be filed anytime. That falls into our residential rental permitting pages of the bylaw of the website. So you'd have to know it's there, or if it's associated with a rental property, it's a little easier to find. So we need to do some work there. And your question, do we need help? Yes. Any suggestions, recommendations that counselors or other groups can get that information out there. We do have a very large email contact list of about 700 unique users that are mostly associated with residential rental properties, but they also are owners that are associated with other non-residential properties that we could send a message to. That's another option. We're using that for the upcoming bylaw changes with rental permitting. But definitely open to any ideas on how to get the message out there. Once we do find out about it, it's a very quick response. It gets prioritized, and so far the response has been well received, and the issues are taken care of for the handful that we've dealt with over the past 6 months or so. Moving on to the rental permit staffing. To all your questions, the answer is absolutely. That's what's going to happen. We're going to, as we do with all of our programs, look at revenue collection and look for trends and look for issues or anything notable, so that we're prepared when we come into budget season, or just so I can alert the finance team of things that are happening. I think, as I mentioned in my responses, I expect it to be pretty predictable once we get moving, and that's how we presented the program initially, because minus less than 100 properties that maybe don't register late that we have to chase after, the bulk of the properties renew on time, and that's a pretty predictable registration fee that'll be collected. And then once we work out our process for inspections, the same will happen there once we have all the staff in place and the schedule built out for the 5-year cycle. I've talked a little bit about this during the adoption of the bylaw or during the creation of it, and I'm talking about it now with various groups. So I've been having meetings with members of the Amherst Landlord Association and other landlords, and just trying to prep them for the changes and talk about how some of the questions and that are going to come up through the implementation, particularly with the inspections, how they could be helpful, and useful to our understanding of some of the things that they deal with and how they respond to things. So we've been talking a lot about that, and what I've been mentioning is that throughout this, my thought was always, let's go through this 5-year cycle so that I can answer all the questions that we haven't been able to answer about what is the condition of rental properties in Amherst. And I think once we know that, it makes it more, accomplishable to be able to look at problem properties and prioritize, where the focus should be. And it's very likely that we might be able to recommend that this ongoing inspection of all these properties is not necessary. I'd like to look at a way to grade or score properties, and maybe some of them come off the inspection list. Some of them, have increased inspections. But the number of properties that we've been into and have this information on, first of all, are all problems, and they're pretty big problems, but it's a small number of properties, small number of units in town. And as I said from the very beginning, the only way to be able to address this, if this is what the council's goals were, and particularly the CRC, was to address how to ensure we have safe and healthy residential units. The only way to really do that is to first get a look at them. So I think those conversations have to happen, and I expect to bring that information in the future.
Thank you.
Councilor Walker.
Thank you. This is just a quick question, and it's also still about the rental bylaw inspections and fees. And I think you partially answered this in the document, but just a little bit of an elaboration. In terms of the question, we know that the staff will be financed by the fees. And then the question was, will there be an accounting system to track and assess? And I was just wondering if that's going to be separate, or if like the rental bylaw inspections is going to be a little bit more overlapping with like general inspections in terms of resources.
I'm envisioning at this point it's going to be pretty separate. It's such a large task for the department to handle, that the staff that will be assigned to this work will be dedicated to it, almost entirely. I think the overlapping of resources comes with covering vacations and unforeseen situations or big building openings that are usually over a period of weeks. So I think we have to do that. I'm expecting that the two inspectors that'll be dedicated to this program will be scheduled out for the year. They're going to have to complete 500 to 600 inspections, and the follow-up that goes along with that. We still want to maintain the complaint response component that we've always done and be available for issues that are not routine, regular scheduled inspections. And I don't think there's any way we would be able to do that without having staff dedicated to it. And the same goes for our administrative support staff person that we'll be hiring. Will have to really be on top of scheduling, rescheduling, documenting, reporting, and staying in communication, and being the person in the office that can answer the phone when a question comes in while our inspectors are out. So I think that's going to be the approach. There isn't any other staff here that would be available because of all of their demands. They wouldn't be able to help out. Our general building inspectors that are out looking at buildings and schools and all the other things that are going on will need to stay available for that. So I don't think there's any other overlap that would occur.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, I think we can let you all go then. Thanks very much. It's been a good conversation, and I think we've had a number of good questions raised and a number of really good answers. So,
and the written responses were terrific. So thank you for taking the time on them.
Thank you very much for having us. Have a great day.
All right,
Thank you.
So the next thing on the agenda is the Amherst Regional Public Schools, and I don't know if we have any additional information, but Andy, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, thank you. I think that it's important to start with the report of the BCG meeting from yesterday. And Mandy was there too, and so I'll rely on her also to contribute to the discussion. But I think that basically what happened was that Sandy Pooler has spent a lot of time thinking about and analyzing what is going on with the budget in future years and what is going to be the impact of various things that might affect that budget projection. But the important thing to start with is to look at the long-range financial impact pages 48 and 49 of the budget book that we have, and to look at the bottom of page 49, and we have FY25 as proposed, which was with the 4% increase to schools in balance. But then at 26, you'll notice a deficit of excess of 467,000, 27 in excess of 516,000, deficit projection for 28 and 704,000, and 29 in excess of 854,000.
Andy, what are you reading from?
I'm looking at the bottom of page 49 of the budget book.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
It's right there.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you.
Very bottom of that chart.
Yeah.
And then what he presented was an additional spreadsheet, and we asked that it be sent to the BCG after the meeting, and I have not received it, and I don't think Mandy's indicating she hasn't received it either. And I didn't copy it all down, but what Sandy was doing was to take various factors that would affect those budget numbers and how much it would increase it. And of course, one of them is the 6%. And if we went to 6%, and the 6% became the base budget, it automatically increases those deficits in a substantial way in each successive year. And then there were other factors to be concerned about that also had an effect on the future projections. So that what my takeaway of it, and then I'm going to try and then see if Mandy has anything to add to this, since she is the other BCG member from the committee who was there, was that the budget process that we have has to start looking seriously at that budget deficit that's going to grow and is going to go greater if we go to 6%, and that we try and look at what our strategies are going to be going forward. And I think that there's some disappointments I have, because I don't think as often as I have said that school budgets continue to increase greater than revenue increases, and that's not a tenable long-range plan, and we need to grab hold of that and take responsibility as a community. And the community is the towns that provide the revenue, and the schools which are spending the revenue, and figure out a long-term solution. And we can't delay this. We can't keep kicking it down the road, but we continue to do so. And that I was very disappointed, therefore, to read about in this morning's paper about the result of the school committee meeting and the proposal that Irv Rhodes put forward, that we create some kind of process that allows us to all work together, because it belongs to the entire communities, and it's not going to be solved by revenue. Everybody keeps talking about revenue, and I think revenue can help a little bit, but we're not going to be able to raise enough revenue. And I say that because of my years of working with the legislature and the financial side, in addition to everything else. So I think that that was one takeaway, is that we really need to try and solve the problem for FY25, but really not delay on working on 26. And the other thing that I think that as a committee we need to be talking about is what questions do we need to present to Paul and the administration about the executive side of government about the alternatives that we might consider if we're going to try and solve the 25 problem so that we can get on the 26. So that's my report on the meeting and my takeaway. I don't know, Mandy has other views, so I'll stop.
Councilman Henneke?
Yeah, I'll briefly share my screenshots of the charts Andy was talking about that have not been shared other than through a meeting, so that people can see what was presented, and I can explain some of it. But after doing this, I had other comments I wanted to make. But I would say the one other thing that Andy didn't mention that BCG essentially put on the table for further discussion was overrides, levy overrides, and potentially starting serious discussions about asking the voters of Amherst for a property tax override. So this top chart that says current add 355, 3% growth, retirement, and 4% growth all relate to increases in expenses that he was talking about, and what that might do based on the projected revenues in the chart that's in the budget book that Andy referred to. So the current is the chart that's in the budget book. Sorry, I can't move the plus. That's where it was when I took the screenshot. That's where Sandy's cursor was. The add 355 to the region it says that if we add it to the budget and it becomes the base for the next years, what would change between the current chart and that new, essentially a new chart, and what the deficits would be between revenue and expenses. 3% growth, the chart in the budget book projects 2.5% growth across all 4 functional areas through FY29. If you change that from 2.5 to 3, what does the deficit look like? Retirement 10% in FY26 is an acknowledgement that we don't know, because our retirement levy or costs, expenses stayed basically even this year. The chart in the budget book projects it out at a growth of approximately 5% a year every year. And that line says, well, what would it be if next year we kind of have to make, if the state says we're at 10% next year because we were basically flat this year. In other words, making up those 2 years instead of 1. And 4% growth is the same thing as the 3% growth, but at a 4% level. Andy had asked during BCG, what about the Municipal Empowerment Act and any of the local revenues, local option taxes that are proposed to be changes? What kind of increase would that show to the revenues? And the bottom chart here that says increase in motor vehicle excise by 5%, hotel up 1%, meals to 1%. What's that? That would result in essentially a one-time bump to revenues of approximately $250,000. And then presumably from there, an increasing amount similar to what they increase yearly now, based on just cost increases on, hotel, rates and stuff that go up yearly. But if the Municipal Empowerment Act was enacted, we'd see our revenues essentially go up about 250,000 once, and then a small that would stay throughout. So all I've got is those screenshots, so I can't manipulate any of those numbers or anything. But since I had them, I thought I could share them so that people could see them. If people have questions on that, I'm happy to, maybe we can answer some questions, but I have a number of comments I would like to make related to the budget process, and the frustration I've had with the decision and the recommendation the Finance Committee needs to make. And it's not a frustration with the Finance Committee. And I want to say it's not a frustration. I see we have some school committee members. It's not a frustration with the level of Information you've provided us. I am frustrated with our town manager and the information we've not been receiving from him despite questions. We've been trying to receive information about what our options are and what the town staff's thoughts or pros and cons on those options are. I know I'm not the only person that sent questions to the town manager regarding some of the options we think might be there and what his thoughts are, or can he give us some pros and cons? But I've also sent a lot of questions regarding how legally any recommendation we might make works at the council level. This includes if the manager does not work with us, what legally the council can do under MGL. And I believe what we can legally do is, if we look at page 292 in the budget book that has the financial orders, the only thing we can do is raise the financial order 2502 line in the column raise and appropriate, the first green column on the left, by the 355, and legally under the state law that we just adopted, decrease some other line item in that column, not in any other column, in a different financial order by 355. That is very hamstringing, because you look at what those columns are. Retirement assessment, we probably can't do that actually legally without creating more problems for the town. Debt service, we probably can't do that. It's probably not a true option in that line, because we'd default on debt if we didn't appropriate enough money there. And so there's very few line items in there. But the other thing is, they're in two different financial orders. And I've not been able to get any response from our town staff as to how we would legally potentially increase a raise and appropriate number in a financial order 2502 and have to, by law, decrease one in a different financial order, either 2505 or 2505A or 2504. Do we have to do it in the same vote with the same motion? We normally vote these all different motions. I haven't been able to get any response from that. If we want to use ARPA funds, how do we actually do that in a way that legally does that? Because it doesn't show up in any of these raise and appropriate numbers. And so how do we adopt a 6% budget if we, the council, aren't adopting or voting on any use of ARPA funds at all, by getting to the regional school committee that, hey, we're actually going to adopt your budget, and are we going to adopt your assessment method? I don't know. We don't have those answers. Paul, in fact, said we don't know yet when I asked him that on Tuesday. If we wanted to use free cash, we need a new financial order from Paul. Will he be willing to do that? Or would he resubmit a financial order under 2502, the regional school assessment, that includes the use of free cash? We can't do that one on our own. We need his help. And we haven't gotten any statement from Paul as to whether we'll get that help, and whether, if we need a new financial order, or if we want to use ARPA funds, if he needs to submit a new budget, do we even have the time based on our schedule and the charter law about public hearings and public forums and timings for posting that to do it by June 30? And that, in my mind, I am just so frustrated, because we as a committee can't actually vote a recommendation without knowing whether whatever we want to do can be accomplished legally by June 30, and how to accomplish that. And so I feel like the lack of information from our town manager about those matters is prohibiting our committee from actually doing its job within the time frame we must do our job under the charter, which is by June 4th, vote a recommendation. And so I'm sorry to take so much time, but I think it's important for the rest of the committee to know my frustration, and for the public and for the manager to hear that frustration, not just in an email at this point, but in public.
Kathy? Comments?
You're muted, Kathy.
Muted, Kathy.
Mandy very clearly articulated what I was also going to say, so I want to build on it. I have separately, she said she's sent, I have separately sent what you just said, Andy, questions. The questions have been sent. We have had no answers. And you, Mandy, you looked at financial orders and gave out specific numbers. I'm sure they're sitting here somewhere and I don't know where they are. So I always get to them later. But as I understood it, when we briefly met on this on Tuesday, one possible place, and then I was jumped on for it, is if we looked at the capital budget, which is at 10.5, and we realistically say what's under that budget, which might not be spent in 2025. So it wasn't a targeting a non-worthy thing. So my example was the Jones Library debt service. And I picked that one out because a year ago, it was also in the capital budget. And Holly explained to us why we had a big surplus at the end of the year because we didn't spend that money. We had expected to spend it and we hadn't spent it. So if we realistically think that whatever happens, we only need half of it, or we only need 2/3 of it, or we only need 70% of it at $1,000,000.1, it would yield 350. So that was one of your examples, Mandy, that there is a separate order for capital, and we come into capital, not designating what, but we've looked at what underneath it. So we're not trying to kill a project, and it's not a next year we wouldn't fund it. So that would be one possibility that we as a council, as I understand it, could legally do. We could say we're going up in one section and down in another, and it's an exact balance. And we don't have to specify where it would come from in the capital budget, other than to understand there's a possible place it could come from that wouldn't undermine. And even if we come up with a repair thing, it's not going to be fully financed before a half a year has gone by. And that was a 12-month estimate on a $15.8 million debt service. So unless you do that on day one, you don't incur that money. As Sandy carefully moved some really big projects into the next year that we voted on this year. So we didn't see anything in this year's budget. So we need an answer on that. And the use of ARPA funds, that may be completely at the town manager's discretion. But I think getting a better feeling for where it might come from also leaves us on better financial confidence line. And I just want to point out that the $1 million of solar, unless Congress overnight gets rid of the credits, gets us back $300,000 with the 30% credit. And I went and I looked at the kilowatt hours that Crocker Farm uses. We could likely have enough additional solar to offset the electric costs at Crocker. There might be a little bit left over. So we would be financing all of the energy costs, heat and everything. And so it would help us on the budget long-term. So that to me is extremely wise investment. And he's told us that everything has to be obligated by the end of the year with a specific, and that could be specific. A couple of the other big items on the list, it's not clear to me we'll have all the details on it, so that changing some of those wouldn't undermine a project that we already know exactly what we want to do. And there's one other potential source, but I think we need, Bob drafted a report for us with an option A, an option B, an option C kind of thing. We can't easily decide where to go with about a better sense of consequences. And what do we give up by that? So I'm prepared to make a motion on where to take it, but I'd like it. I'm not sure I get other people on finance to go with me on it, because we don't have enough information on our alternatives. So my last comment is I would really appreciate getting the information BCG received, put in the finance packet. I think that's a useful thing, because I think it leads us to, this is a one-time help on the regional budget. We had a dilemma before the regional schools came in of saying, what does FY26 look like? And we may have to take a hard look at some other things that we committed to. And I can talk more about that later as we went through this budget review. So I think I'll stop there. And the very last thing is I've been calculating budget costs for some of the new departments we added. Since we only see the salary costs, the real costs are about 30% higher, but I can't tell you the exact factor because we don't have health insurance and pensions. So we do have to be financially accountable to the town as we look across this whole budget. So Mandy, I agree. I don't even know how to finish writing the report. Well, I mean, the rest of the sections can be descriptive, but the key part of it is this $355,000 and looking to FY26, with a message.
Thanks, Kathy. Councilor Walker?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to express, most of the exact same concerns as both Mandy and Kathy just shared, so I won't go over them again. But I did want to add that I think we all are understanding the state of our financial future in Amherst and what limited wiggle room we have. And I don't think that that changes what our community values are and what we want to see happen within our schools. And so I do think that this is going to take some carefully considering what our options are. And I know we've talked about not knowing what our options are and just picking one. But I'm wondering in terms of like what our next steps for us as a finance committee, how we want to move forward with the report. And I think we can list like we recommend X, Y, and Z options, but then does that move those options to the council to then discuss? And does that just give us more time to get information? Because we don't have that information. Are we in a position where we need to say we need this information by this date, or we make a different decision? I think I would just like to get a better idea of in which direction this committee as a body would like to move. And if we are all, in fact, thinking that we would like to recommend finding the additional monies within the budget, if that's something that we agree to as a committee, I think would be helpful for me to also understand. And I'm wondering if that is a conversation we can have now, and if not, when.
Let me hear from Andy and Bridget and Holly. Andy?
Yes, I guess it's important that we have this discussion about how we would fund 6% and that we make sure that we get the questions out to the town manager that will help us to comfortably make that decision if that's the decision that the council makes. So it is important that we have that part of the conversation, but I don't think we can lose the importance of conveying to the council that as a finance committee that we have joined with BCG and looked at the long-term problem and it needs a resolution. And there was one other aspect of the BCG meeting that I forgot to report and Mandy didn't report either. And that was that there was some discussion about whether or not we are being too cautious in our budgeting process, and we're in fact building money each year that ends up going into our stabilization fund through free cash because of excess free cash at the end of each year, and whether we should just be more aggressive. Well, we can't be more aggressive and put a balanced budget out, but one of the things that I remembered after the meeting was that when Holly and I'm glad that Holly is here and has her hand up, because when Holly provided in October the FY23 year-end report, she did an explanation and provided a chart about the amount of excess that was available at the end of each year. And she pointed out that because of COVID, we've been running an anomaly. Normally, and I've all of you know how long I've been involved in town budget process. We've generally been ending years with 2% that has been returned, and that is the 2% excess of the end result over the budget. In other words, a surplus of the budget as opposed to a deficit of the budget, which is what you desire to do in a well-run organization. You always come out a little bit ahead of where you projected to be, because you don't want to be a little bit below where you're projected to be and end up in a deficit situation, having operated with an inadequately planned budget. It has been higher in recent years, but her report very clearly explains why there was a one-time bump in one year that was due to the closeout of the Health Claims Trust Fund, and the remainder of the years were due to COVID-related budgeting, which is both cautious and we were a little bit more cautious in budgeting because of the uncertainty of how COVID was going to affect the budget, and because we ended up with ARPA and other funds that enabled us to take care of some of the problems that we didn't anticipate. Federal government helped out all state and local governments in a whole big way that is ending, which is part of the schools problem and part of our problem. So I don't think that the hope that we could be more aggressive in budgeting and therefore solve our problems that way is a real resolution. But that was an additional part of the BCG discussion that Mandy and I forgot to report.
Bridget, did you want to make some comments?
So I was just going to say some of what Andy said, because I felt like there were a couple pieces on BCG that didn't come forward. So one was what he talked about, but the other thing was that there was discussion. Sandy said he's using the most conservative guidelines, and that you could use more flexible guidelines and they would look different. And so at some point, Mandy asked if maybe we could see those side by side. And then I think there was the discussion as well of if the way that we're doing it now ends up where we have too much free cash in the end point. But I think that he explained pretty well that, that's because of staff shortages currently. And so then that money gets really heavy at the end. But if we are aiming to have a full budget of what we've requested fully staffed, then, then that's not really an area to dig into. But I wanted to also report that I left the meeting at 1:40, but it was reported back to me. So this is still secondhand. But that from there on, most of the meeting was about a Prop 2.5 override for next year and what that would look like. And I just wanted to let folks know that that's a conversation that also came up at the regional school committee. So I think with the amount we're looking at for next year, especially if this is a one-time gift, I don't know there's anything that might fill it besides Prop 2.5 override.
Thank you. Holly?
Okay. Good morning. There are so many questions, and I'm not going to pretend to know the answers to all of them, but I'm going to try to answer a few of them or clarify a few things. So number one, I don't think that the town again, this is my opinion. I don't think that the town manager intends to not fund the additional 2%. It's a matter of where and how we're going to fund the additional 2%. There are a lot of different options. Some of them have been discussed, or many of them been discussed. There's probably other options as well, but I believe at this point the sort of top three options are: number one, ARPA funds; number two, free cash; or number three, making a change to the current budget and reducing somewhere else in order to fund the additional regional school district money in the operating budget. So I believe those are sort of the top three options. They all come with their own challenges. I'm not gonna, again, it's very difficult for me to sort of understand the opinions and political sides of all that, but they all can be accomplished, I suspect, I assume, and I'm hopeful, by June 30th. It's just a matter of which option the town decides to go with through the finance committee, the town council, and the town manager, which is picked as the preferred option. So if ARPA funds are used, there would be no additional appropriation orders needed. It would be a grant agreement between the town of Amherst and the regional schools to pay some payroll expenses in an amount up to $355,440. Again, it wouldn't be an appropriation out of the town funds. It would be a grant agreement out of the ARPA funds. Free cash would be, again, an appropriation order that would need to be written if free cash were decided to be used. And then making a change to the current budget, reducing one area and increasing in another area, would just be modifying the draft appropriation orders that we have already, just making changes to one to increase it and making changes to another to decrease it. So there's a lot of options. I don't know where the town manager is leaning for the number one option. I don't know where the finance committee is leaning towards the number one option. I don't know if you need feedback from the town council to figure out which you think is the preferred option. But I do want to just set people's mind at ease that I don't think there is any intention of not funding it. I think it's just a how do we fund it, which is the best, which is the quickest, which is the easiest, which is the preferred. And I think that that's sort of where we stand at this point. There are other options that folks are talking about, in terms of the regional track and field request for that additional money, and where is that going to come from, and how are we going to do that? Can we combine these somehow? Can we take this out of, capital and fund both of those things? Those are all options. I think that there's just this has not happened before. This is not something we quite know how to deal with. We are definitely learning as we go through this process. I certainly have never dealt with it before. I don't believe that the town manager has dealt with it before. Getting advice from legal counsel, getting information, checking in with other cities and towns on how they've dealt with this, and getting information from Sandy, it all just unfortunately takes time. So I just wanted to say that. And again, this is my opinion of how things, I don't want to speak for the town manager, but this is my opinion of how things are going to proceed.
Thanks. Paul, the town manager, can speak on this.
Oh, Paul is
himself.
here now.
Paul, do you want to weigh in?
I do, and I think I got pretty much everything. The bulk of Mandy Jo's and Kathy's and Alicia's comments, so I appreciated all those things. I think Holly did say a lot of the things that I was going to say. I think the threshold question is something that Alicia brought up, Councilor Walker brought up, which was, does the Finance Committee agree with putting in the additional 2% to the regional school district budget or not? We have not heard from the Finance Committee on what you are recommending. If that's the case, my goal is to align my budget with the council's. There are two paths forward. One is I stick with the 4% for the regional school district. The council chooses, if it wants to, by 2/3 vote, to put in additional funds and then finds a way to reduce it. I think I've said at the last meeting that I am inclined to find an additional 2% for the regional school district. But I have heard from individual Finance Committee members, but not the Finance Committee. If the Finance Committee is making that suggestion or recommendation, then, and I'm in alignment with that, then we would find what is the best path forward to do that. And there are multiple paths. Holly laid out the three paths that we have looked at that we've talked about. And each one has its pluses and minuses. Some are simpler than others. Some have time constraints, others don't. So I think, I don't think there's, I think we do have time to process through the proper way to do it. But I guess I really do need to hear from the Finance Committee as to whether you are in alignment with this additional 2% or not. I mean, if the majority of the Finance Committee is not, then I would be hesitant to be putting forward a different financial order.
Thanks, Paul. Bernie?
Well, do I want to give the regional school, because the elementary school budget's been done, balanced? Do I want to give the regional school an additional 2%? No. Will I vote to do that or support that? Yes, because the consequences of not doing that, I think, will only complicate matters and cause too much tumult. So, I'm going to put a Band-Aid on the situation. How we Band-Aid it, we've got three choices. I'd throw out a fourth, which is stabilization fund, which is traditionally what stabilization funds are for. So we can put a Band-Aid on. I'm very disturbed by the talk of an override. Any consideration of it. We've pushed the capital reserves up by 10.5% because we're trying to avoid overrides on our capital projects. We just got an override for, in my opinion, an excessively expensive elementary school, but we just got an override. Overrides, property taxes are a wealth tax. Our wealth has gone up because of inflation. Our income, on the other hand, has not necessarily gone up. So when you increase a wealth tax, you're in effect adding an income tax. My cost of living adjustment as a former state employee is $360 a year. That's it, period. And if you want to go check the Boston Herald's records, you can find out what I get for pension. I think you have to be very, very careful about any consideration of an override, particularly if the school committee is unwilling to take a look at how its budget is structured and how the money is spent. The Mass Teachers Association has a handy-dandy guide to Proposition 2.5 overrides. And one of the cautions that the Mass Teachers Association puts out there is you don't want to fail the sore thumb test. And what's the sore thumb test? When we have a school budget that puts our cost per pupil at either the 12th or 16th highest in the state, clearly the highest of any of the towns around us, then by the MTA's measure, we failed the sore thumb test. So let's set aside the cost, the talk about overrides, and let's get down to the more difficult and harder task of looking at how we spend, looking at where our money comes from, and trying to make some adjustments and changes. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Haneke?
Thank you. And I appreciate Paul saying he will work with us because it has been unclear to me for the last 2 months whether that would be the case. So to hear that that is the case, I think for me, the problem is, and I will say over the course of the last 2 months, as I have thought about this, I have changed some of my thinking. I would like to find a place to fund the additional 2% that the school committee is asking for. But it's where the rubber meets the road, right? Can the finance committee agree on one place to do it? Or can the full council agree on one place to do it from? Because if 5 of us want to fund it, but my preferred method is X and I won't do Y, and someone else's preferred method is Y and they won't do X, maybe we can't get to agreement. And I think that's where my frustration has been coming from, is because we haven't heard from the staff what the pros and cons of each are in terms of, I just, some of the questions, Paul's not going to be surprised I've asked these of him already, what are the pros and cons of decreasing the OPEB line and doing it, because I know if we do it under state law by decreasing a raise and appropriate line on this page 292 of the budget, one of the financial orders, as long as both financial orders are in the same motion, I think we can do it legally without risking any fights that we didn't do it legally. But I look at that, my options are OPEB and capital. But I kind of know what the consequences of the OPEB line issue are. But the capital line, what I haven't heard is, we all know there's this 1.2 million in the capital now for library spending. And we look at it, and as Kathy's said, it's probably not going to all be spent for the library next year. And so what's going to happen to it? What is the town's plan for that money? Is it to just have it sit there and not be spent, and then continue on? Capital's a different beast, so it just would sit there, I guess, the whole time. I don't know. It wouldn't end up in free cash probably, because it's an appropriated use, potentially. But what happens with it if we don't modify that line and keep it there? Or is there a plan from staff to modify that line in the future to, instead of having it as debt service for a library, spend it on an actual library HVAC project? Or is there a potential plan out there to use it for the track? Which is one question I've asked, right? But I need to know what those options are and what staff is thinking about that 1.2 before I could even consider the possibility, or as I consider Kathy's possibility of reducing that capital line by 355 to fund the school, because there is potentially money there. And I'm missing the information from the staff about their thoughts on what happens with that money. For free cash, great. We get a separate order, or we get a modified, I guess it's financial order 2502, the regional budget assessment, where there's a raise and appropriate, and then there's a free cash spending. If we modify any of these financial orders through the manager process, do we need to follow the supplemental budget requirements of the charter, which require a public forum, and I think 10 days notice to hold that public forum? And so do we need to, on Monday's meeting or on the 17th, the 17th might be too late to receive that modified financial order if we have to hold a public hearing or a public forum that requires 10 days notice. We might need those modifications on Monday, and the finance committee should know that now, because then we should be voting today to recommend that on Monday the manager produce the modified one so that we can get it referred. And that's where my frustration lies, is I'm not confident free cash or even and so that's the free cash one. Do we even have the time, given that we might need modified orders, to do it? With ARPA, my question relies with, as we consider these options, I'm not quite willing to use the solar money to do this on a one-time basis, but maybe Kathy's suggestion of the youth empowerment money might be there. What are the other options? Or some of the stuff that might not, there was a lot of roads and sidewalk money at some point in it, as that's what we'll do if we can't do any, maybe we could dedicate some of that to it. What are the options and where would it be? Because the finance committee has to come down with one potential recommendation. And then if it's ARPA money, what does the regional assessment financial order number 2501, the regional assessment method financial order, do we approve the 6%, even though we're not appropriating it all because it's coming from some other one? So I don't know the logistics of, does that risk us somewhere else in terms of what are our recommendations on each of the 6 financial orders we're being asked to make recommendations on? And we haven't gotten the advice from town staff as to, if we do ARPA, this is what our recommendation needs to be on the assessment method order or on the budget assessment order, because we're voting recommendations on financial orders. And we don't have that information, and some of that might need voted today. Others of it might need voted, everything needs voted Tuesday. And so, yes, I want to find the money, but there's some things I don't want to find it from, and some things I might be willing to find it from. And I don't know whether the other committee members agree with me on those issues.
Kathy?
Well, I have a suggestion to at least get one piece out of the way. Paul says he needs a vote from us on whether we're going to recommend that we go from 4% to 6%. So I make a motion that we recommend to the council that we go from a 4% increase to a 6% increase for the regional school budget. So if
I
can
second that. Sorry. You can-
Thank you. No, and so if I can make it just as a simple motion, I'm willing to take advice, but that would be my simple motion, because the next motion is what Mandy is asking for. And we recommend to the council that they ask the town manager to fund it. Do we need to do that now? Or do we need to say in one of three ways, present options to us on Monday? Because I know where I would go, and Mandy's just laid out she wouldn't go the same way. So I'm making a motion to just get the first step of this, that it sounds like there's, I haven't heard anyone say no to 6%, but if we could vote on that piece, we would at least say, yes, we're going to 6%. And that at least changes one of the appropriation orders. And then we figure out the other, then we continue this discussion. I don't know whether people are willing, Bob, to move to that vote, but if we could have that vote, then we could go to the second piece of it.
Yeah, I concur, but let's hear from Andy and Mandy Joe and Paul. So, Andy?
Kathy's just put another thing on the table, and I guess I am not in favor of taking a vote today. And I would rather have a better picture of how it would be funded and put it as a package than to take a vote. I think that we can indicate by our informal comments, and I think we probably already have, that all of us are trying to figure a way to get to 6%. We want that to be the result, but I don't know that I really feel comfortable doing a part of a motion and not doing the entire piece and presenting an entire plan, because I think that's what the Finance Committee ought to do. Second thing that I wanted to comment on is that the mention was a little bit made about override, and Bernie's already spoken on the topic. I agree with what he said. I think we have one of the highest tax rates in the state. We have certainly one of the highest tax rates around. We have a population that has a lot of retirees. I am very uncomfortable. I am not sure that it would pass at all if we were not in a position to rush into it. If we tried to do a November override, we'd be sitting in an override vote at the time that people are getting their first tax notification of what they're going to be paying in additional taxes because of the debt exclusion override. So that I think it's therefore not good timing for rushing an override. And I think that to support, we really need to hear, get more sense of where other towns are and that other towns would be with us, because if they're not willing to do overrides and solve the problem, then I'm not sure that in the long run that we should be doing an override to solve the problem. So I really am concerned about the override. And I guess the other two things the other thing we talked about are what are the options. I am still feeling that maintaining the capital budget at the level that we've talked about and proposed is the right thing to do. I've spoken about that at previous meetings, and I have not changed my position that backlog, and we're including our $15 million of roads backlog, the amount that we need to create safe and usable streets for all users, including kids riding the bicycles to school, which was the TSO meeting in part yesterday. I think is something that we just need to recognize, that our streets and sidewalks are totally inadequate, as well as our needs for a fire station our need for a DPW facility, so I can't go there. The one thing that I do think is something we should be looking at is getting, we don't have, except for the first quarter, our reports on what's happening with this year's budget. I think with the number of vacancies, that there could be a free cash option, because at the end of this year, we may end up with one more year of significant free cash balance and for the current year. And we can advance the decision of what we want to do with that free cash balance by including that in the process now. So those are my additional comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Bob, I just have a quick point of order. Is there a motion on the floor?
Yes, there is. There's a motion and it has been seconded. So we're just discussing. Councilor Haneke?
So, yeah, I'm going to keep my comments to the motion, and I'm not sure I can support just a blanket motion, because our job is to say how to do something, not that we want to do something. And that's always been my concern regarding this conversation is I actually think many of us, or a majority of this committee, and maybe a majority, I don't know whether it's a majority of the council, I haven't talked, are trying to find a way to fund it, but it's how to that maybe we can't reach consensus on, and that changes the votes, right? And so I'm looking to and so I can't say yes, fund it when I don't know what I'm funding it from, because what I'm funding it from changes whether I say yes, fund it. And that's why I need the information from all of these potential options to know whether I can say yes, fund it that way, or whether that's a no-go for me. You know, I implied that maybe capital is a no-go for me. Andy has said capital is a no-go. I need more information to say whether capital is a no-go for me. You know, right now I'm leaning free cash because to me it seems the clearest, both essentially legally and potentially the least damaging to the current proposed budget. That I will admit, Paul proposed a budget that meets our financial guidelines. Any line we change in that budget means we're changing it away from the financial guidelines. You know, especially if we're decreasing some lines, we're telling him those guidelines didn't quite matter. And by seeking this money, we're also saying that too, but I understand that. But decreasing other lines that he worked hard to stick to our financial guidelines, I'm not sure we should do. So I'm leaning free cash, but I need to know with that one that we have the time to do it by June 30. And I just don't know legally how that works, especially if we don't get an order till June 17th, if we have to hold public forums on it. Whether that can be done all legally under the charter in time to vote by June 30, given the meetings we have. So I'm not sure I can support the motion on the floor as worded, because it's not specific enough and it's too general.
Paul, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, two things. The council has given itself the authority to override the town manager's budget, which, as Mary Jo, is in compliance with the financial guidelines. You can make a motion, any councilor can make a motion to, by 2/3 vote, increase the budget as you decrease something else. And I understand you're saying we would like more information on how we would do that. That's not the path I hope you take, because I think if the finance committee is saying we would like to see an additional 2% going to the regional school district, then we will be able to come up with options which Holly has laid out in general terms. I would wonder if the maker of the motion would consider, instead of saying a 6% increase in the budget, would say an additional 2% increase in the budget as a sort of a recognition that the 4% is the amount that was in compliance with the financial guidelines, but that the council is making an effort and I would align with that for an additional 2% to the regional school district's budget. It's maybe a matter of semantics, but I think that it provides some clarity in what actions are being taken by the council. In terms of timing, I think that the different pathways we have going forward, I have not charted out exactly the timing is whether a separate public forum has to be held or not. But I sort of feel like a lot of the options can be accommodated, and we would have to review with legal, which we've already had the conversation a bit with about ARPA. There doesn't need to be an action by the council. That's a town manager action. But so I think my main point of talking about this is seeing if that makes sense to folks, if it's to say an additional 2% versus moving straight to a 6% increase in the regional school district budget.
Kathy?
I'm totally willing to amend that. So Paul, I'll say it again. As that we recommend to the council that they ask the town manager, or they recommend that the town manager add an additional 2% for the regional school budget. And I am prepared, Mandy, to say, and that the additional expense be financed from free cash. And let me just, so if people, I'm willing to amend it to make it a two-part piece. And let me just speak to that for a second, and then I'll see whether the person who seconded it likes the new revision. The reason I think we could do that is I do think that we're going to come in under on the capital budget because of the line I've spoken about. And if Andy went through Holly's memos that showed us why we had more free cash at the end of the year than expected. One year it was because we didn't spend an expected debt authorization. And so if we don't spend it, it's going to show up as we didn't spend that amount of money. And that will show up as free cash. So if we wanted to, we could replenish the amount from reserves. So I'm thinking that ultimately we can put that money back in. The other, to preserve the solar money, that's $300,000. That almost replenishes it. So we could replenish it. So I think the idea of reserves makes total sense. It doesn't take something away from another piece. And as long as a financial order could be written in a way, Paul, that also allows us to vote that money. So if I'm willing to propose that two-part piece, and if you need it to be, we usually try to do a complicated motion that has two parts into two motions, but I'm willing to do it and if people will bear with me for now. So I don't know, Alicia supported my original 6%, so that's changing it to an additional 2%. And then adding, and that we fund the additional cost from using free cash. So I have to just see whether Alicia's willing.
I will accept those.
Okay, so
Yes.
Yes, so you will accept it? Yes. All right. Any comments, Bernie?
Well, my preference would have been to take it from ARPA money because it's one-time money and it wouldn't impact any of our reserves. Taking it from free cash would be, I think, another acceptable approach and probably more economical in terms of people's understanding of how budgets work and where the money's coming from, including it as a funding source in the current year's budget. What I would hope is that the council could accept that rather than try to go through the motions of trying to override the budget and making changes here and there. That could also get us into a situation where we don't have a budget by June 30th and we end up going to a 1/12 budget, which is not a comfortable kind of thing to do. So in terms of Kathy's revised motion, I would support it. Again, I'm not getting what I'd like, but it's a move forward.
Andy?
It's difficult because I think if this was a future meeting and I have received a additional quarterly report which we can request from Holly to make sure that we have it before we vote, I think I would be more comfortable in saying, yep, we're there. I think that we're there, but I don't know, and therefore I will have to vote no on this because I think that we're taking a vote on something that is unnecessary at today's meeting. I think the message is loud and clear that we want to get to 6%. I don't see that there's any advantage in taking the vote now, and I think that we would be in a better position to do so when we have the quarterly report and we know that the assumptions we're making are correct. We only had the first quarter report from last year, and I think that we can, there's more information that could be available.
Holly, when will that report be ready?
I have the second quarter report ready. I can send it out. The third quarter report is still in the process. I don't have that one completed yet. I can probably have it completed by the end of next week for third quarter report.
Okay.
I can forward the second quarter report to the finance committee and post it on the website, and then we can put it on a future agenda.
Okay. Right. Councilor Haneke? Thank you, Holly.
I guess I have a question for Paul. It's unfortunate we won't have the third quarter before next Tuesday, because that's more information than a second quarter. But I'm thankful that we can get the second quarter by Tuesday the 4th, when the committee is required to vote recommendations on the budget. But my question for Paul is, do you need a vote today on this motion to start preparing the orders or how to do it, given what's been said at this meeting? Or could that vote wait till Tuesday when we can see, so that it's a potentially stronger vote in terms of ayes and nays, if we have more information by Tuesday and postpone the vote till Tuesday? Or do you need an actual vote today in order to do what you've indicated, which is you want some information so that your staff isn't working on 5 different ways, such that we could get then the information by Tuesday, or depending on what you determine on when what it would look like before we actually vote this motion to use free cash.
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think, you know, I think every finance committee member has weighed in, and if I could just clarify, there is no objection to an additional 2%, but I understand there's the caveat of the intention of the finance committee would be to add 2% to the regional school district budget, with the caveat for many members of depending where you take it from. Right. And I think if that's the sense I'm getting of the meeting, I'm okay with the sense, but I do know that you have a motion on the table.
Yeah, we do have a motion on the table, but I think that is the sense of the committee, that we definitely want to go to the additional 2%, but I think we're torn as to where it comes from, where that money comes from, and how certain we want to be about free cash. Councilor Haneke?
Yeah, I guess then I'd like to either potentially ask a withdrawal of the motion itself or a postpone. I'm not ready to make a motion to postpone the motion on consideration of the motion, because I'm still thinking through things. Because and I guess the next question is, you know, I take Bernie's thoughts seriously about ARPA, but I'd like to hear maybe more from Paul, and I don't know whether he's ready to do that now, about what the other options beyond solar are for ARPA money, the use of ARPA money. And then I'd really like to know how that looks in terms of the votes that the council has to take on the 3 financial, or particularly the 2 financial orders on the region budget, particularly the assessment method and the the assessment amount, because we'd be voting numbers that don't agree. Like if we vote the assessment method, we're not taking a vote on a full appropriation to comply with it. So that's my concern about using ARPA money in a sense, is which part of ARPA is it coming from, but also sort of the legality and logistics of essentially potentially approving two orders that don't agree with each other. And how does that potentially hamper the town or the region itself when the town hasn't actually appropriated money under the assessment method it just approved? And maybe it's worth, instead of binding us to free cash today with a vote on a motion, getting more information to go forward on Tuesday, because maybe we'd change which portion we do, as I think out loud.
If I can respond, I think that's precisely the things that we are looking at, Mandy Jo, in terms of meeting the requirements of the region, in terms of voting the budget. Whether ARPA meets that requirement or not, it certainly meets the finances requested by the Regional School District Committee. But there are other ways we can handle ARPA that can also support this, that we've looked at as well, in terms of how we allocate the funds. So as Holly said, we've not gone down this path before. The council's never, we've never moved above the recommended amount. So it's really uncharted territory for the town. We always have serious concern about funding an operating budget with one-time money. And I think that our presentation to the bond rating agencies and their analysis of us, which I sort of summarize, is that we have abided by very strong financial guidelines, but I do recognize, I said this many weeks ago, that this is an unusual circumstance with the regional school district. And I think moving in this direction is the best move for FY25. But the finance committee members also raised the longer term challenges that are facing the regional school district and how that's going to be addressed. Because while this might solve FY25, there's a looming bigger problem in FY26, and there has to be a discussion about what that looks like for the entire town's finances. Not to tell how the money is spent, but to say how much money is available to be spent.
Kathy?
Paul, I just want to amend one of the words you use. I think there is full support for the additional 2%. It's not dependent on which way we do. I think we've identified two preferred ways of financing it. One is ARPA and one is free cash. And we'd like to know more of it. It's not a if, it's yes, just so you understand that it's a yes on the two. And then is needing more information to make a decision. So Mandy, you're suggesting I wait. I'm not anxious about the third quarter report, because as I said, I think there's going to be that money and there's reserves, but I put this out in the interest of time. We have to draft a report. It's not just that we have to take a vote on Tuesday. And, I think the current version of the report needs to start in a whole different way. And that would be easy on, the current budget, but long-term budget, on what we're looking at, and particularly one sector. So we just raise that as we may be solving a 2025 issue, but we can just start with that very strong message to everyone, the council. But so I guess I'm hearing, I wouldn't mind taking a vote today, but I'm hearing there's going to be one, maybe two no's, because they need more information and they don't want to take a vote now. There's a slight preference for ARPA, but not a strong preference. And I just would like to send a signal. That's why I separated them, that the Finance Committee is going to recommend an additional 2%. So since no one wanted me to do that one without the other part, I'm caught in this quandary, like tabling it until Tuesday feels like we never actually voted on it. So Bob, you can advise me on whether we call the question and we move for a vote on this, knowing that anyone who votes no is not necessarily against it. They're just against making a decision on where the money's coming from. And no one wants me to have it in two parts. So I'm in this. I'm willing to separate them, 2%, and the money comes from the following, and have people say not ready to vote on that. So any guidance, but that was my goal, just to come out of this, not leaving it mushy. This has been before us for multiple weeks now, and I've looked at the numbers more than once, and I know all the other ARPA. It's not just the youth center, Mandy. There's a huge chunk for Bangs, which had so little underneath it at the point we were seeing it, and would have to be fully flushed out before December. So I don't know about that one either, so there's money. So that's just what I don't want to have the vote go down when everyone's in favor of the 2%. And I'm ready to vote for my own motion with a yes. So anyone can tell me what they would I'm trying to get to yes here.
Councilor Haneke?
So I guess if the committee still wants to consider the use of ARPA funds, then if we vote today on the motion as worded, there's no consideration of ARPA funds anymore because of how it's worded. And I think that's what we as a committee have to determine, and whether a vote to use free cash is something, whether we want to sort of preclude consideration of ARPA funds, or whether we'd still like to consider ARPA funds. Or, I hesitate to even change this motion wording again, but could it be
absolutely
the 2% with the intention to use either free cash or ARPA funds pending more information, or something like that, that would signal what I feel like I'm hearing from Kathy and Councillor Walker, a desire to signal. And so if Paul wants that signaling, I want to signal it, but I'm hearing from myself, I'm saying myself, I'm still trying to figure it out, but I'm also hearing from Andy Steinberg that and even from Bernie, that we don't necessarily want to preclude ARPA consideration right now. And so I don't know whether the best method is to yet again try and do a modification of the motion so it considers both, or whether we should just table the motion till Tuesday and deal with it then, or all.
I'd be happy to amend it, Mandy. I was thinking the same way. It's either free cash or ARPA, with that to be determined, next week. I'm happy to amend it to say free cash or ARPA.
Councilor Walker, is that acceptable to you? You're on mute. We may have lost her.
Well, I can see if I've got someone else to second, and I see Bernie's hand is up.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you. Bernie? Bernie, you're on mute.
I thought I clicked a little button, but I guess I didn't. I'd just like to make the point that we're not telling Paul what to do. We're making a suggestion to the manager. So if we suggest we'd like to have this 2% and we support it, and we suggest it comes from free cash, then, and he comes back and says, well, I can meet the first part of your suggestion, but not the second. That's another story. So we just want to keep our lines of authority clear here. The other thing is that how much, Holly, can you say how much free cash we have on hand right now?
Just give me one moment and I can find that for you. Hang on.
Yeah, because we're not, spending free cash we're accumulating this fiscal year. We're spending free cash that we accumulated last fiscal year.
Correct. Free cash is only certified in the fall time, and I just have to double check everything that came out of it, make sure that we have it, and then on June 30th, that free cash.
You have some confidence. You have some confidence that there's 355,000.
Oh yes, there most definitely is. Yes.
Okay, that's Close
Yeah.
enough for this government work, I guess. So I don't know that we need to. I think if Paul is looking for a sense of the committee, then he's certainly got that. The 2% add-on for this year is okay. We've identified two sources of funding where we prefer it come from. Now we're basically handing this back to him and saying, okay, we've set these limits. That we're telling you what we like. We're not telling you what you have to do because you're the manager, but we're telling you what the sense of this committee is.
Councilor Walker?
Hi, sorry. Yes, I do actually have to leave the meeting now. So I just wanted to make sure that this was the direction we're moving in, because if we were going to vote, I wanted to be able to vote, but I do have to leave.
Okay. Kathy, do you still want a vote on your?
Yes, yeah, I would like a vote. I would like a vote on the motion, and I can read it to the extent my messy handwriting has it in double notes. Is I make a motion that we recommend to the town council to recommend that the town manager add an additional 2% for the regional school budget, and that the additional expense be funded either by free cash or from ARPA to be determined later.
Okay. And Alicia, that's Councilor Walker, that's acceptable?
Yes.
Okay, then we should vote. Councilor Haneke?
I'll vote aye on that one.
Andy?
I'll go with aye.
Kathy?
Yes.
Councilor Walker?
Yes.
Bernie?
I support.
And I'm an aye, so it's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. So let's just quickly go through the draft committee report. I'm looking for. I know I talked to Alicia about her section. Said she's planning to get it to me tomorrow. Bernie, how are you doing on your sections? When can I expect to see it?
You should expect it on Sunday.
Okay. Andy, are you gonna write up something for police, or do you want me to write up police?
I was going to try and write up something on police, though I may not get to it till the weekend for the sake, because as you heard earlier, I have to do a TSO report.
Yeah,
is a higher priority.
Okay. All right.
But it isn't that long a section on the police.
No.
And so I don't think it's going to be a complicated issue. My other comment on the report is that I really think that we need to get, for the committee discussion, the draft on what where we are with regional schools, because I think that our recommendation is now clear as far as the bottom line of an increase for FY25, and for in a methodology to be determined later. But the piece about our concerns about 26 and beyond, and our expectations and recommendations of what the council might want to say on a process going forward, so that we get that addressed in a positive way, I think should be in our report. So we need to go work on that.
Yeah, Kathy, you and I can work on that. I can certainly work on it tomorrow if that works for you, Kathy. Okay. Councilor Haneke, you have a comment?
Yeah, and I'll probably try sending you some thoughts on this, but I wanted to put it out there now. I think, and it might be my section that I have to redraft, the overall budget section, as I think about this, is sort of a summary of just sort of what we've heard from all the departments regarding the budget, in terms of staffing, in terms of, just from the municipal side, it's a very tight budget that is not permitting X, Y, and Z, and staffing is an issue across all budget areas, both maintaining staff levels that are budgeted, but also many departments want staffing. And so I think I might take a look at the overall budget section, which was sort of my section about does it meet the financial guidelines and all, to talk a little bit more about the challenges that we have heard from just the sort of all challenges, that were across departments, sort of not just one department has this small thing, but those trends that we heard across all departments in terms of their challenges. And find a way to sort of make that front and center too. This report, I guess I'm concerned also, it's very helpful, but it's also going to be over 20 some pages long. So I'd like to find a way to highlight parts that we really want to highlight. And I don't know whether that's adding an executive summary that includes some of this or something, but if someone just wants the guts of it, of does the budget meet the guidelines? What are the overarching challenges, and what are our recommendations and the motions that need made? Can we get that to them in, like one page at the very front somehow?
I don't know if we can get it in one page, but we could certainly do an executive summary. The other thing that I have found is very helpful is to put in little call out boxes, like here's like the major message for this department or something like that. We can think about adding those. So Kathy?
So I think Holly had her hand up briefly, probably to give us the answer on free cash. Was that what you were doing, Holly? But then I do have a comment.
I certainly can give you that answer if you like. We still have $4.6 million in free cash.
So my comment was going to echo Mandy's. I mean, others like to tell stories from their past, so I'll just tell you one quick one. I worked for a Secretary of Health at one point, who, when we came in with a long report, he said, "This is what I'm doing with your report," and he threw it in the trash can. And he said, "You come back and you tell me in one page cover what's the most important thing for me to know and where to go to find out more." I mean, I just think we need to do that. And in terms of stronger messages, that's part of the place we can say the out years don't look good. So the same as Mandy said, we've got a staffing crunch across. Even retaining people is a challenge, much less thing. And there are a couple other things that we can decide whether we want to highlight them, and then quickly go to the regional budget as a core thing. So we can try to get it into one, Bob, and the only way I've ever found to get things into one is use bullets, to try to avoid long paragraphs, to the following things. But I'm available to try to do that. And just so people know, the draft that Bob sent out earlier today has two sections I drafted on regional and elementary. And one of the things I did was go back and look at enrollment and staffing back to 2010, because I just wanted to see with no commentary. And I had to go to two different sources for it because it's easy to find enrollment in DESE. I had to go to staffing reports. So I included tables for both of them and the regional talks a lot about FY26, but I was waiting for this discussion to finish it. So it's a draft on it. Therefore, we recommend. It's got question marks, but I can round that out because we just heard the three options for funding today. So those, Bob, I'll just amend, but I didn't know whether people had a chance to even see that there are two pieces in there on the schools.
Yeah, I did. I'll send out. I modified the CREST write-up based on your comments, Kathy. So let me send out a new version which has today's date on it. I'll send that out to everybody right after this meeting.
And then I think the intent would be we'd get a report that has an executive summary and it has some of the highlights on it and at least reflects what we just did today on this regional piece with this open-ended, where's the money coming from? Well, open-ended, but down to 2 sources rather than could come from anywhere.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Well, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? I'll second. Councilor Haneke.
Aye.
I'm an aye. Andy?
Aye.
Kathy?
Yes.
Bernie?
Bye.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Return then. Thanks very much.